I'm going to tell you why you're playing a game that you can't win. Get excited because this is Tiny Leaps, Big Changes. Here's what I mean when I say that you're playing a game that you can't win. We talk in personal development all the time about how we need to rely on willpower, how we need to be stronger, how we need to be more passionate, how we just need to show up. We just need to do the thing that we say we're going to do. And on the surface, this sounds like a great idea. This sounds like what is missing. If I could just be more consistent, if I could just be more disciplined, if I could just find the strength to show up for myself, if I could find my why, if I could do any of these little tricks to figure out how to get myself to do the thing, then I could get everything that I want. We're convinced that this is the path forward. But unfortunately, it isn't. And I know that sounds a little bit depressing, but it isn't. That is the truth of the matter. And the first way that we can start to make change is to understand what the actual truth is. The actual truth is that willpower and discipline and all of these little tricks, none of them are going to work. At least not for most people. So what I want to talk about in this episode is, what is this game that we're actually playing? What does the reality of that game look like? Why is it that willpower and self-discipline and all of these tools really don't work in the long term? And most importantly, the part that you're probably here for, what can we do about it? What is the actual path forward? Real quick here before we jump into the episode, I want to put out another call for research calls. I'm looking to speak with grad students and people who are working adults going back to school. I want to connect with you, learn a little bit more about what your life looks like, how you sort of fit those things into your day, and what issues you run into. So if that sounds like you, head over to tlbc.co/schedule now and schedule a quick call with me. It'll take 10 to 15 minutes. I'd love the chance to speak with you. So head over to tlbc.co/schedule and I'll talk to you soon. So let's start here. When I say that willpower, self-discipline, starting with your why, passion, all of these things don't work, what do I mean? Being disciplined, having willpower, pursuing something you care about often does work in the short term. Often they do get you to make changes. And those changes might last a few weeks. They might last a few months. They may even last a few years. And so when you pursue these things, when you utilize these tools, you convince yourself that they worked because, hey, they worked for me. Now, there is this thing called survivorship bias or survivor bias, where we tend to look at the experience we personally had with a situation and use that as the proof that that thing worked. We do this pretty unconsciously, and it is a major driver of pretty much all of the advice that exists in personal development. This is why we get things like you need to improve your mindset, or you need a better system, or you need to be disciplined, or you need the willpower, or this particular specific habit is what you need to build. Wherever the advice comes from, even when it comes from me, it's coming from a place of this is what worked for me. Given the situation I had, given the context I had, this is what worked for me. It should work for you too. It's survivor bias. And so when we look at these tools, those tools are recommended because they work for certain individuals. Survivor bias. However, what we don't recognize, what we don't look at is the context and the situation around those behaviors. The reason that certain behaviors work for certain people often has very little to do with that individual person's willpower or discipline or passion, and far more to do with the circumstances with which they did that thing. For example, this podcast, I've said this 1,000 times on this podcast. If I were to launch this exact podcast today, you wouldn't know about it. It would not do well. The reason this podcast did well, at least in part, not to say that it's not a good show or that I haven't worked hard or any of those things, because that's not really the point. The point is that I launched it at a certain moment in history where other things aligned and allowed this show to rise much further than my own personal willpower and my discipline and my ability to work hard would have ever been able to take it. So there is context in the question. If I were to tell you, hey, you should start a podcast, you maybe should. It might be a good idea. I really can't say. There is context that matters here. Podcasting worked really well for me, but I had a specific set of circumstances within which I launched that podcast. Without those underlying factors, me telling you to start a podcast is never going to produce the same result. The same is true for pretty much every piece of advice you receive in personal development. And one major thing that makes these things difficult to apply is the fact that everyone around you is utilizing your own psychology to get you to not take action. A company's job, say any brand that advertises on this show, their goal is to put something in front of you and get you to take action on that item. So they might want you to buy a new car or subscribe to a meal box or download an app to get therapy or whatever it is. Like, they have a business goal. Now, that's not inherently a bad thing. If you need a therapist, then using that app to get a therapist is a pretty good idea. And so sometimes a consumer's goal and a brand or business's goal can align. But that's not always the case. What advertising does, and really what any appeal for anything does, is play on an individual's internal triggers to get them to follow through in a particular way. And that can sometimes align with that individual's needs and goals, and sometimes it doesn't. But when it doesn't, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's that individual's free will to choose to pursue that or not. In the same way that we all sit here and we follow the personal development advice, we try the Pomodoros and we try the lists and we do the morning routines, in the same way that we get that advice and we think, well, that worked for this person, and I really respect this person, or I really seem like I want to be like this person. In the same way that that psychological trigger gets us to try all of these things without the context that allows those things to work, brands use psychological triggers to get us to purchase things without the relevance and context around whether or not those things are actually solving our problems. And so when I say we're fighting a game, we're playing a game that we cannot win, what I mean is that everything in the world is designed to get you to take a particular action. You are, at any given moment, being acted upon by 1,000 different triggers. And in that environment, you expect yourself, or a personal development coach expects you, to be able to find the willpower and the discipline to not only follow through on the behaviors you say you want to do. It's never that simple. What's actually happening is, in order to follow through on the things you say you want to do, you have to utilize that willpower and discipline to say no to the 1,000 other things that want you to do something. And so you are constantly in a situation where you are climbing uphill in the mud, in the rain, climbing uphill, just to do the simplest things on a day-to-day basis. And then you factor in how the majority of us, if we stop working, if we get injured, if we get ill, our financial situation goes down the toilet. Our hopes for the future goes down the toilet. We get so far into debt that we can never find our way out. We have now also these external and internal pressures of needing to show up every day and needing to make certain decisions just to stay alive. Then you have the thousands of brands and people and communities and content creators and so on and so forth that want you to do this, and this. And then you have, within the realm of personal development, all of these people telling you, no, you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do this. None of them considering the context of you and your life and what your needs are. And you expect yourself to just be able to make the right decision, to just be able to will it out. That's absurd. That's not a game I want to play. That is a game that even if you don't lose today, you will eventually lose. It's like going to the casino thinking that you're going to come out rich. It's never going to happen. The odds are against you. And so then that raises the question, what can we do? What can we do? And I promise you, I'm not just being fatalist about this. There is something we can do. And that thing is to be careful. Be careful of what we consume. Be careful of the choices we need to make. Be careful of the things we decide we want to do and why. Be careful of who we listen to and where that information comes from. Be careful of what we believe about ourselves. Be careful about what we believe about others. We need to put more care into the way that we view the world and the way that we interact with the world. And when I say care, what I mean is we need to be mindful. We need to be conscious. We need to be aware of what is going on and what is affecting us at all times and put ourselves in position to actually deal with that and maybe even avoid it rather than just letting it happen. For most of us, we live our lives, whether we want to believe it or not, unconsciously. I live my life unconsciously. I consume endless amounts of content on a day-to-day basis that I could not tell you I consumed. I have no memory of it. But rest assured, that content has played a role on my ability to act, on my ability to be myself, on my ability to show up for myself and for the people that I love. The things we consume, whether it's content or food or ads or whatever it is, plays a massive role in who we become. And it's tricky because we can't see it, because we're not aware of it. And so we need to become aware. We need to be conscious. The way we become conscious is to ask ourselves the question, is this serving me or not? If it's not serving you, if it's not applicable to you, if it's not something that fits your life, then get rid of it immediately. Even if that means me, like being honest, if this podcast does not serve you and your needs, stop listening, stop watching. That would be the best case scenario for everyone. Because you should not spend any more time than you absolutely have to on things that don't serve you. And the only way to actually filter that and limit that time is to recognize what it is that you are doing on a day-to-day basis that serves you and what does not. Lift as much of your behavior into the conscious realm as you can. Process it. Take the time to contemplate whether or not this is something you really want to be doing or engaging with or consuming, and then decide accordingly. And it's going to take a while to get there, but eventually you'll get to a place where willpower, discipline, finding your why, whatever tool you choose to pursue your particular goals, will not only be easier for you to access, but you'll be able to consciously choose one that fits in with the context and situation that you have. And then finally, you'll be playing a game that you can actually win. Thank you so much for being here. If you're listening to this, find us over on YouTube. Connect with me there. Leave a comment in the comment section and just let me know what you think of this episode. I really appreciate you and your time and every moment that I get to spend helping you on this journey that we call life. So thank you for that honor. I've been Greg Clunas, and remember that all big changes come from the tiny leaps you take every day.